My name is Alexandra and I am 32 years old. For the last 10 years, my entire life, my every waking moment, has been dedicated to a world of sword and sorcery, of fallen kings and ancient magic. I built that world brick by loving brick. I named its heroes, I wept for its villains, and I wrote every single one of the 2 million words that made up the 6 volumes of the international best-selling series, the Ethelgard Chronicles. But if you were to walk into any bookstore in the world, you wouldn't see my name on the cover. You would see the name Clara Beaumont, my cousin. The beautiful, charismatic, and utterly fraudulent face of my life's work. Tonight was the launch party for the final book, Ethelgard's Echo, a night that was supposed to be the triumphant culmination of a decade of her fame and my silence. But I knew something no one else in that glittering, champagne-soaked ballroom knew. I knew that by the end of the night, the entire world would finally learn the truth. I had made sure of it. Before I tell you how a single, carefully planted question during a Livestream Q&A session brought a literary empire crashing to the ground, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Let me know in the comments below. And if you've ever felt like your hard work was invisible, or if someone else was taking credit for your accomplishments, go ahead and hit that like button because I have a feeling you'll understand the journey I'm about to share with you. And if you're new here, make sure you subscribe because this community is for anyone who has ever had to fight to claim their own story. The story of how I took back my name didn't begin with a grand plan for revenge. It began with the quiet, desperate hope of a 19-year-old girl who just wanted to be seen. It started, as so many family tragedies do, with love. I loved Clara. When we were children, she was the sun and I was her shadow, and I was happy with that arrangement. She was all sparkle and laughter, the kind of girl who could charm her way out of any trouble. I was the quiet one, the observer, the one who lived more in the pages of books than in the real world. My parents had passed away in a car accident when I was 16, a tragedy that shattered my world and left me in the care of my only remaining family, my Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark, Clara's parents. They took me in, gave me a room, and for that I was eternally grateful. But I was never their daughter. I was a responsibility, a sad story they told their friends with pious headshakes. Clara was their miracle, their prodigy, their shining star. And in their home, her light cast a very long shadow. My refuge was writing. I filled notebooks with sprawling maps of imaginary continents and genealogies of fictional royal families. While Clara was out at parties, I was diagramming the rules of forgotten magic and crafting a language for my wood elves. This world, which I called Ethelgard, was more real to me than the muted beige walls of my bedroom in my aunt and uncle's house. It was mine. When I was 19, I finished the first full manuscript. It was over 150,000 words, a sprawling epic I titled Ethelgard's Crown. I had poured my entire soul into it. My grief, my loneliness, my desperate yearning for a world where the quiet and thoughtful could be heroes. It was all there, coded into the quests and battles of my characters. The only person I wanted to share it with was Clara. She was 20 at the time, flailing through her second year of a business degree she despised. She was beautiful and popular, but she lacked direction, a secret insecurity that only I was privy to in our late-night talks. I gave her the manuscript, my hands trembling. "It's probably silly," I mumbled, my eyes fixed on the worn carpet of her bedroom. "But I wanted you to read it." She took it, a little surprised, and promised she would. A week passed. Then two. I was too shy to ask about it. Then one evening she burst into my room, her eyes wider and more alive than I had seen them in years. She was holding the manuscript, the pages rumpled from being read and reread. "Alex," she breathed, her voice a hushed, reverent whisper. "This isn't silly. It's a masterpiece. It's better than anything I've ever read." Tears welled in my eyes. It was the first time anyone had seen the real me, the person who lived in those pages, and validated her. We stayed up all night talking about it. She asked a million questions, not just about the plot but about the heart of it. She understood the characters as if she'd known them her whole life. For that one night, we were not the golden child and the sad orphan. We were two people united by a story. And then came the proposition. It was a few days later, presented not as a scheme, but as a brilliant symbiotic idea. "I know people, Alex," she'd said, her voice fizzing with an excitement that was impossible to resist. "My friend's dad is a literary agent. But you know how you are. You hate talking to people. You get so nervous. What if I was the face of it? I could do the talking, the meetings, all the schmoozing you hate. And you could just write. We'd be a team. We'd split everything right down the middle, 50-50. It would just be our little secret." My stomach twisted. The idea of someone else putting their name on my work felt like a violation. But then I looked at Clara, her face so earnest and full of hope. And I thought about having to walk into a meeting to sell myself, to talk about my deepest, most personal creation with a stranger. The anxiety was a physical thing, a tightening in my chest that made it hard to breathe. "I don't know, Clara," I started. That was when Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark got involved. Clara, in her excitement, had told them everything. They sat me down in the living room, a united front of gentle, loving pressure. "Alexandra, honey," Aunt Carol began, her voice syrupy with concern. "This is a wonderful opportunity. Clara has the personality, the sparkle to make this work. You know, you've always been a bit of a wallflower. This is the best of both worlds. You get your story out there and Clara can build a career. You'd be helping each other." Uncle Mark nodded sagely. "She's right, Alex. The world of publishing is brutal. They'd eat a sweet, quiet girl like you alive. Clara can protect you from that. It's a perfect partnership." They made it sound like they were protecting me from myself. They framed my introversion not as a personality trait, but as a disability. They painted a picture where my success was impossible without Clara's social grace to pave the way. And me. I was 19, living under their roof, desperate for their approval, for them to see me as something other than a burden. I wanted to make them proud. So I agreed. I convinced myself it was temporary. A foot in the door. Once we were established, we would tell everyone the truth. We wrote up a simple contract on a piece of notebook paper, a childishly naive document that stated we would be partners and split all profits equally. We both signed it. I felt a surge of hope. We were going to do this. We were a team. Clara was as good as her word, at least at first. Her friend's father, the agent, loved the manuscript. A bidding war started between two major publishing houses. It was a whirlwind. I stayed in my room, writing, while Clara went to meetings in New York, dressed in smart business attire my aunt helped her pick out. She would call me every night, breathlessly recounting the day, asking for notes on what to say, what points of the plot to emphasize. I fed her the lines. I wrote the synopses, the author bio, her bio. And when the deal was signed, a staggering 6-figure advance for a 3-book deal, we celebrated. We ordered pizza and sat on my bedroom floor, just like when we were kids. The first check was deposited into a joint account we opened, and we split it exactly down the middle, just as we'd promised. Felt real. Felt like it was working. The book, Ethelgard's Crown, was a runaway success. It hit the bestseller lists within a month of its release. Clara's face was suddenly everywhere. She was a natural in interviews, charming and witty. She used the anecdotes about our childhood that I told her, reframing them as her own solitary, imaginative youth. She talked about the long nights spent dreaming up the world of Ethelgard, and I would watch from my laptop, a ghost in my own machine, my heart a confusing mix of pride and a deep, gnawing ache. The lie began to settle in, growing roots. At family gatherings, it was all anyone could talk about. "Clara, you're a genius," my uncle would boom, ruffling her perfectly styled hair. "We always knew you had it in you." They would look at me and smile. "And isn't it wonderful, Alex, how supportive you are? Every successful person needs a cheerleader." I was demoted from partner to cheerleader in the space of a single Christmas dinner. I would smile and nod, the words caught in my throat. What could I say? This was the deal I had made. With the success of the first book, the pressure for the second, Ethelgard's Shadow, was immense. I was writing constantly, a machine churning out chapters to meet a punishing deadline. Clara, meanwhile, was living the life of a celebrity author. There were launch parties, literary festivals in exotic locations, and glamorous photo shoots. I saw her less and less. Our nightly calls became infrequent texts. The joint account was still there, but things started to change. "The PR firm is taking a huge chunk, Alex," she'd explain over a rushed phone call. "And the wardrobe for the press tour. It's all part of the brand. It comes out of the gross before we can split it." The 50-50 split was becoming more like 60-40, then 70-30. I was too timid, too afraid of conflict to argue. I told myself it was fine. I didn't need fancy clothes or a publicist. I just needed to write. But the resentment was a poison, seeping into the corners of my mind. There was one moment that stood out, a moment of horrifying clarity. Clara was doing a major televised interview. I was watching it live, my stomach in knots. The interviewer was a fan, a serious journalist who had clearly done his homework. He started asking about the intricate rules of the magic system, specifically about something called the Law of Echoes, a complex piece of world-building from deep in the book's appendix. I saw the panic flash in Clara's eyes. It was a flicker, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. She had never bothered to read the appendices. She gave a vague, charmingly evasive answer. My phone buzzed. It was her, a frantic text from under the interview table. * Law of Echoes. Help! * My fingers flew across the screen. I typed out a condensed, 3-sentence explanation. * Magic leaves a residue. Powerful spells create echoes that can be manipulated by weaker mages. It's why the villain can track them. A moment later on the screen, I saw Clara's eyes subtly flick down to her lap. Her bright smile returned. "And what's so fascinating about the Law of Echoes," she said, reciting my words almost verbatim, "is that it deals with residue. The idea that powerful spells create these echoes. And that those echoes can then be manipulated. It's really the core of how the villain is able to track the heroes." The interviewer was impressed. "Brilliant," he said. "Just brilliant." I felt sick to my stomach. After the interview, she called me, laughing with relief. "That was a close one. Phew. See. We're such a good team. You're my secret weapon." She didn't see the horror of it. She didn't see that our team was a lie that was becoming more dangerous and more fragile with every success. To her, I wasn't her partner. I was a tool. A useful, necessary, and utterly secret weapon. And that was the day the love I had for my cousin began to curdle into something else entirely. Something colder and harder, something that would, in time, fuel a rebellion she never saw coming. By the time we got to the 4th book, Ethelgard's Flame, the dynamic had irrevocably shifted. The brand of Clara Beaumont was a multi-million-dollar industry. There were movie options being discussed, merchandise lines, a whole universe spinning out from the words I typed alone in my small apartment. I was living comfortably, but not lavishly. I was paying my bills, but I was a world away from the life Clara was leading, a life funded by my imagination. The lie had become so enormous, so all-consuming, that it had developed its own gravity. I felt trapped in its orbit. I tried once to gently broach the subject of credit. We were at a rare dinner, just the two of us, in a restaurant so fancy it made my skin itch. "Clara," I started, nervously pushing a piece of asparagus around my plate. "Now that the series is so established, I was thinking, maybe for the next book we could, put my name on it too. As a co-author." The change in her was instantaneous. The warm, effusive cousin disappeared, replaced by a cool, calculating stranger. Her smile tightened. "Alex, don't be silly," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if she were letting me in on a business secret. "We can't do that now. The brand is Clara Beaumont. It's a name the readers trust. If we suddenly add a co-author, it'll look like I can't do it on my own anymore. It'll dilute the brand. It would hurt sales. It would hurt us." The way she said "us" was a masterclass in manipulation. It was a velvet cage, reminding me that we were in this together, that her success was my success, even if my name was nowhere to be found. "Don't you see?" she continued, reaching across the table to pat my hand, her touch feeling alien and cold. "What we have is perfect. It works. Why would you want to mess with it? You get to live your quiet life, no pressure, no paparazzi. And I handle all the ugly stuff. We both get what we want." But I didn't want a quiet life born of erasure. I wanted recognition. I wanted to be acknowledged as the creator of my own world. But looking at her determined face, I knew it was a hopeless fight. She would never willingly share the spotlight. I had created a monster, and now it was wearing my cousin's face. My only solace during those years was online. Under the username Lorekeeper88, I was a member of a small, obscure forum for fantasy world builders. It was a place for nerds like me, people who cared about the migratory patterns of fictional beasts and the syntactical rules of constructed languages. In that anonymous space I could be myself. I shared tidbits of Ethelgard's deeper lore, the parts that never made it into the books, the histories and myths that only I knew. Over the years, I developed a close friendship with another user, a woman from Chicago named Lena. She was a librarian, sharp and funny and fiercely intelligent. We moved from forum posts to private messages, then to emails and video calls. I eventually told her everything, the whole sordid story. I needed to tell someone or I felt I would go mad. Lena never judged me for the choice I'd made as a teenager. Instead, she listened, her outrage growing with every detail I shared. She became my anchor, the one person in the world who knew the truth and saw me not as a cheerleader or a secret weapon, but as the architect of a universe. "One day, Alex," she would say to me during our late-night calls, her voice firm, "you're going to have to burn it all down." I would always laugh nervously and change the subject. The thought was too terrifying. The catalyst came, as it so often does, not with a bang, but with a toast. The publisher had decided that the 6th book would be the last in the series. They wanted to go out on a high. I was in the final stages of writing Ethelgard's Echo, a book that felt like saying goodbye to my dearest friends. To celebrate the end of an era, Clara announced she was taking the family out to dinner. Me, Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark. It was at the same fancy restaurant where she had shot down my co-author dreams years ago. The entire dinner was a performance. Clara held court talking about her legacy, the fans, and most excitingly, her new project. "The publisher is so thrilled with the end of the series that they've already signed me for a new one," she announced, beaming. "A whole new world, a whole new story. I've already got so many ideas." I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. My ideas. She was talking about ideas we had brainstormed together, ideas that had sprung from my mind. Then, at the end of the meal, Uncle Mark stood up, his wine glass raised. "A toast," he said, his voice thick with pride. "To my brilliant daughter, Clara. True storyteller. We are so proud of you." They all clinked glasses. Then Clara looked at me, a beatific smile on her face. "And I want to make a special toast," she said, her voice ringing with false sincerity. "To my sweet cousin Alex. For always being my biggest cheerleader. I truly couldn't have done it without your encouragement." Encouragement. That was the word that broke me. After a decade of backbreaking work, of pouring every ounce of my being into this world, of sacrificing my own identity for her ambition, she had reduced my contribution to encouragement. I was not a partner. I was not a collaborator. I was not even a secret weapon anymore. I was a cheerleader. A glorified fan who happened to live in the same house. In that moment, looking at their smiling, oblivious faces, I felt something inside me snap. The years of quiet resentment, of swallowed anger and buried hurt, coalesced into a single point of cold, hard clarity. Lena's words echoed in my head. "You're going to have to burn it all down." I smiled back at Clara, a real smile for the first time that night. "To Clara," I said, raising my water glass. "You deserve all the success you've earned." The hidden meaning was mine alone. That night, I went home not to my quiet apartment, but to my parents' old house, which I had kept but rarely visited. I went up to the attic, the air thick with dust and memories. I found them in a sealed trunk, my old notebooks. Dozens of them, filled with my looping teenage handwriting. The first ever map of Ethelgard, with coffee stains on the corner. Character sketches I had drawn. Pages and pages of drafts, with entire plot lines that were later abandoned. Proof. Undeniable, time-stamped, physical proof of my creation. I sat there on the dusty floor for hours, the notebooks spread around me. The plan began to form, not as a burst of anger, but as a meticulously constructed blueprint. It would not be enough to just tell people the truth. Had to show them. I had to do it in a way that was theatrical, undeniable, and on the biggest stage possible. It had to be a writer's revenge. The first step was the book itself. I was still finalizing the last chapter of Ethelgard's Echo. The chapter was a poignant farewell, a reflection on the long journey of the characters. I went back and rewrote it. I didn't change the meaning or the emotion, but I painstakingly altered the phrasing, adjusting sentences, swapping words, until the first letter of each of the first 27 paragraphs spelled out a message. It was an acrostic, a literary device as old as poetry itself. It was subtle enough that a casual reader, or a cousin who only skimmed her own books, would never notice it. But for a dedicated fan, a lore keeper, it would be an irresistible puzzle. The message was simple. Alexandra writes ethelgardisrael.com. The second step was the website. I bought the domain name that night. For the next 3 weeks, while I was putting the finishing touches on the manuscript, I worked tirelessly on the site. It was my secret archive. I scanned hundreds of pages from my old notebooks. The early maps, the character genealogies, the discarded drafts. I uploaded photos of handwritten pages, showing the evolution of key scenes. I created a section on the constructed Elvish language, complete with conjugation charts and a lexicon that had never been published. I even uploaded short, time-stamped video files from an old digital camera, showing a 17-year-old me in my childhood bedroom, excitedly talking through the plot of the first book. It was an irrefutable mountain of evidence, a digital museum of my soul. The final piece of the puzzle was Lena. I called her and laid out the entire plan. I told her about the acrostic, the website, and the upcoming launch party, which was going to be live-streamed to a global audience. "I need you to be there, Lena," I said, my voice steady for the first time in my life. "Not in person. Line. I need you to be Lorekeeper 88. I need you to ask the question." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard her let out a long, slow breath. "Alexandra," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "It's about damn time. Tell me exactly what you want me to say." I gave her the question, the one that would light the fuse. The trap was set. All I had to do now was walk into the party, watch my cousin take her final bow, and wait for the echo of my own truth to finally be heard. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a sea of glittering opulence. Chandeliers dripped crystals like frozen tears, casting a golden glow over the throng of literary agents, editors, journalists, and influencers. Giant, floor-to-ceiling posters of Clara's author photo were everywhere. In them she looked ethereal, her head tilted just so, a thoughtful, mysterious smile playing on her lips. The smile of a genius. My stomach was a tight, cold knot of dread and exhilaration. I was wearing a simple black dress, something I'd owned for years. I felt like a crow in a flock of peacocks. No one paid me any attention, aside from a few of Clara's publishing assistants who gave me polite, pitying smiles. To them I was just the poor, unremarkable cousin, lucky to be invited. I found a spot near the back by a pillar, nursing a glass of sparkling water, my knuckles white as I gripped the glass. I was a ghost at my own feast. Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark found me, their faces flushed with excitement. "Isn't this incredible, Alexandra?" Aunt Carol gushed, squeezing my arm. "All of this for our Clara. It's like a fairy tale. She's worked so hard for it," Uncle Mark added, beaming at the stage where a podium stood waiting. I just smiled and nodded. She worked hard. I thought, the words a silent, bitter scream in my head. Asterisk I haven't slept more than 4 hours a night for 6 months to finish this book. I have a repetitive strain injury in my wrist. I bled for that book. She asterisk worked hard. But I said nothing. My silence had been my prison for a decade. Tonight it was my weapon. I just had to hold it for a little while longer. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. The head of the publishing house walked onto the stage and began a glowing introduction, listing Clara's many accolades and the staggering sales numbers of the series. Then he welcomed her to the stage. The room erupted in applause. Clara glided to the podium, looking every inch the literary superstar in a shimmering silver gown. She was radiant. She was a vision. And she was a lie. Her speech was a masterpiece of performative humility. She thanked her agent, her editor, the marketing team, the sales team. Her voice caught when she thanked her wonderful, supportive parents. She spoke of her creative journey, how the characters of Ethelgard had come to her in a dream and become her closest companions. She was stealing my life, my history, and selling it to a rapt audience of hundreds in the room and hundreds of thousands more watching the livestream. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. I felt a wave of dizziness. Asterisk what if this doesn't work? What if no one notices? What if I'm just humiliating myself? Asterisk then she came to the end of her speech. She looked out over the crowd, her eyes shining with unshed tears. And finally, she said, her voice dropping to an intimate hush, I want to thank you, my readers. You welcomed this world, my world, into your hearts. Your passion has been the fuel that kept me going through the long, lonely nights of writing. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. She didn't look at me. She didn't even glance in my direction. In her grand narrative, I didn't exist. The applause was deafening. She beamed, bowing graciously. The lie was complete. Now it was time to break it. The publisher, a slick man named David, returned to the stage for the Q&A. Clara has graciously agreed to take a few questions, he announced. We'll be taking them from our audience here in the room, and also from our viewers on the live stream. A few hands went up. The first questions were softballs. Where do you get your ideas? Which character do you relate to the most? Clara answered them with practiced ease, reciting the answers I had formulated for her years ago. I felt a surreal sense of detachment, as if I were watching a movie of my own life. My phone vibrated in my clutch. Text from Lena. Asterisk I'm in the queue. My heart is racing. Asterisk I texted back a single word. Me too. David looked at his tablet. We've got time for 1 or 2 more. Let's take one from our online audience. This is from a user called Lorekeeper88. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. The world seemed to slow down. The murmur of the crowd, the clinking of glasses, it all faded into a low hum. I was aware of nothing but David's voice and the look on Clara's face. Lorekeeper88 writes, David read, a slight curiosity in his tone. Clara, I'm a huge fan of the deep lore in the series. While reading the final chapter of Ethelgard's Echo, I noticed what appears to be a hidden acrostic message in the first letters of the paragraphs. Seems to spell out a name and a website. Can you tell us about this secret Easter egg you've hidden for your most dedicated fans? Silence. For a split second, Clara's polished, media-trained smile remained perfectly in place. But her eyes went completely, utterly blank. It was the same look of pure, unadulterated panic I had seen during the Law of Echoes interview, but 1,000 times worse. There was no one to text for help. There was no escape. She was alone on a stage, under the glare of 100 lights and the unblinking eye of a camera broadcasting her to the world. I could see the frantic machinations behind her eyes as she tried to process the question. Asterisk acrostic. Website. Asterisk she had no idea what he was talking about. She had clearly never read the final chapter with any degree of attention. Why would she? The work was already done. She gave a little forced laugh. It sounded brittle like shattering glass. Oh, you know, she began, her voice a little too high. I love to hide little secrets from my fans. Little Easter eggs. Sometimes I put so many in I even forget a few of them myself. It was a weak deflection, and everyone could feel it. The energy in the room shifted. The polite adoration turned into sharp, focused curiosity. David, the publisher, sensed a story. He wasn't going to let it go. A website, he pressed. His own smile gone, replaced by a journalist's keen interest. That's intriguing. What's the website, Clara? On the giant screens flanking the stage, the Livestream chat, which had been a slow crawl of heart emojis, exploded into a frantic cascade of text. People who had the book were flipping to the last chapter. And they were finding it. The message began to appear, typed out again and again in the chat. Alexandra writes. .com. Clara was stammering now, her perfect composure crumbling into dust. I'd have to check my notes, she said, her voice trembling. It's a surprise for later. But it was too late. Someone in the front row, a journalist from a major news outlet, had already typed the URL into his phone. His eyes widened. He looked up from his screen, not at Clara, but around the room, a look of dawning comprehension on his face. He shouted, his voice cutting through the tense silence. The website. It says, Alexandra writes. Who is Alexandra? Every head in the room swiveled, a collective wave of confusion. And then my Aunt Carol, in a misguided attempt to be helpful, to solve the puzzle, pointed directly at me. Oh, that's Alexandra, she chirped, her voice proud. That's my niece. 100 pairs of eyes, 100 camera lenses, all turned to fix on the quiet girl in the plain black dress, standing by the pillar in the back of the room. The ghost at the feast was suddenly in the spotlight. Clara followed their gaze, and her eyes locked with mine. In them I saw not anger, but pure, unadulterated terror. The jig was up. David, the host, looked from the chaotic stage to me. He pointed a microphone in my direction, a gesture that crossed the vast expanse of the ballroom. Are you Alexandra? He called out, his voice booming over the speakers. I felt the weight of every lie, every moment of stolen credit, every silent scream of frustration from the past 10 years. And then I felt it all fall away. I took a single deep breath, stood up straight, and in a voice that was clear and steady and utterly my own I said, Yes, I am. The ballroom erupted. It wasn't just noise. It was the sound of a carefully constructed reality shattering into a million pieces. The live stream feed was abruptly cut, but the damage was done. A red light on the camera blinked off, but the image of Clara's horrified, ashen face was already seared into the minds of hundreds of thousands of viewers. Reporters, smelling blood in the water, surged toward the stage, shouting questions. Clara's agent and a flustered-looking publicist rushed to her side, forming a human shield and hustling her toward a side exit. She didn't look back at me. She couldn't. In the ensuing chaos, I felt a hand on my elbow. It was David, the publisher. His face a mask of grim calculation. He wasn't looking at me with pity, but with a dawning, predatory respect. We need to talk, he said, his voice low and urgent. My office. Tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. He steered me away from the swarm of journalists and into a small, quiet service corridor, leaving the cacophony of my cousin's public implosion behind us. Before I could even process what had happened, my aunt and uncle cornered me near the coat check. The warm pride was gone, replaced by a cold, venomous fury. It wasn't directed at Clara, the liar. It was directed at me, the truth-teller. How could you? My aunt hissed, her face contorted with rage. How could you do this to her? To this family? You humiliated her on the biggest night of her life. After everything we've done for you, my uncle added, his voice shaking with righteous indignation. We took you in. We gave you a home. And this is how you repay us. By trying to destroy your cousin's career out of jealousy. I looked at them, at the two people who were supposed to be my guardians, my protectors. And for the first time in my life I felt nothing. Their anger, their accusations, their twisted sense of loyalty, It was like watching a storm through a thick pane of glass. It couldn't touch me anymore. The fear I'd had of their disapproval, a fear that had dictated my choices for over a decade, was simply gone. Clara was there, huddled between them, her face stained with tears. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of fury and self-pity. "I was going to tell everyone, Alex," she sobbed, the words a desperate, pathetic lie. "I was just waiting for the right time. You've ruined everything. My life is over." I looked at her, my cousin, the girl I had once loved more than anyone. I saw not a monster, but a small, frightened person who had built her entire life on a foundation of my work, and was now standing in the rubble. I felt a flicker of something, a ghost of pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the cold, hard weight of 10 years of deception. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I spoke with a calm that felt utterly alien and deeply powerful. "You had 10 years, Clara," I said, my voice even. "You had 6 books and 1,000 interviews. The right time was never going to come." I turned to my aunt and uncle. "You didn't do this to her. I didn't do this to her. She did this to herself." Then I turned my back on them, on their rage and their lies, and I walked out of the hotel and into the cool night air of New York City, feeling lighter than I had in a decade. My phone buzzed. It was Lena. I answered, and I could hear her laughing and crying at the same time. "Alex! Oh my God, Alex! I watched the whole thing. It was insane. Did you see her face when he said, 'acrostic'?" I started laughing too, a deep, cathartic laugh that came from the very bottom of my soul. "I saw it," I managed to say between gasps of air. "It was better than I ever imagined." We stayed on the phone for an hour, 2 friends on opposite sides of the country, celebrating a victory that had been a lifetime in the making. The ghost was finally free. The next morning the story was everywhere. Literary fraud of the decade. The Ethelgard scandal. Who is Alexandra Reed? The ghostwriter behind the best-selling series. My website had crashed from the traffic, but not before thousands of people had seen the evidence. My old notebooks and drawings were all over the internet. The narrative was no longer in Clara's control. It was mine. I walked into the publisher's headquarters at 9 o'clock sharp. I was met not by an assistant, but by the entire board of directors. The mood was somber, but it was the somberness of a funeral for someone they didn't particularly like. They were in full damage control mode, but they had also seen the writing on the wall, and on my website. They had their legal team verify the evidence, comparing my early drafts to the final books. The conclusion was inescapable. They officially terminated Clara's contract, including the deal for the new series, citing a morals clause. Then they turned to me. David slid a thick contract across the polished mahogany table. "We would like to offer you a new deal, Alexandra," he said. "A 7-figure advance for the rights to the new series you and Clara discussed. And we will be reissuing the entire Ethelgard Chronicles with a new cover, with your name on it, where it always should have been." I looked at the contract, at my name typed out in bold print. Alexandra Reed. It looked right. Clara vanished. Her social media accounts were deleted. She issued a short, terse statement through a lawyer, claiming creative differences and a desire for privacy. She became a footnote in her own story, a cautionary tale whispered about at industry parties. My aunt and uncle tried to call a few times. I didn't answer. Then, about 6 months later, my aunt left a long, rambling voicemail. It was a clumsy attempt at an apology, full of excuses and justifications, but the subtext was clear. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were impressed by my success. They wanted back in. I never called her back. Some relationships are not meant to be salvaged. They are meant to be understood, mourned, and left in the past. My chosen family was Lena, who flew out to New York to celebrate my book deal, and my new friends at the publishing house who treated me with a respect I had never known. Today, a year after that fateful night, I'm sitting in my own office. It's a bright, airy room with a huge window overlooking a garden. There's a bookshelf against one wall. On the center shelf, there is a row of 6 books. The cover art is new, more mature and evocative than the old versions. And on the front of each one, in elegant gold lettering, is the name, Alexandra Reed. I'm working on the first book of my new series. The ideas are flowing freely, no longer filtered through someone else's ambition. It's a story about a woman who discovers she has the power to reshape the world, but first has to reshape herself. It's a story I know well. It took me a decade of living as a ghost to realize that my voice was never the problem. My silence was. I learned that you can't wait for other people to validate you, to give you permission to exist. True validation doesn't come from your name on a book cover or the size of an advance. It comes from the quiet, unshakable knowledge of your own worth. The sweetest revenge wasn't watching my cousin's world crumble. It was the quiet joy of building my own. Thank you so much for listening to my story. The journey was long and painful, but it led me to a place of strength and peace I never thought possible. Have you ever been underestimated or had your contributions overlooked? I would be so honored if you shared your story in the comments below. Sometimes just knowing you're not alone is the most powerful magic of all. Please don't forget to like this video if my story resonated with you, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about finding your voice and claiming your power. Remember, you should never have to shrink yourself to make someone else feel big. Your story is yours to write, and yours alone. Thank you for being here with me today. I wish you all the strength in the world on your own journeys.